So on today's show, I thought it would be fun to break out of the usual discourse that exists and permeates in wrestling and talk about something else, maybe a topic that's a little more, I don't know if you want to call it high level, but something different, right? And I figured talking about giving a bit of an update on the 4 pillars of AEW would be fun. And I figured that it would be probably a lot more fun not doing it alone. So I reached out to a couple of people that have been trying, not as much trying as wanting, because the trying was really easy. I just sent them a DM and they're like, yeah, but I've been looking for the right topic to invite them on. And those two people are Trish and Sarah of the Trish and Sarah Podcast. And I just happened to be joined by Trish and Sarah of the Trish and Sarah Podcast. Hello to you both and welcome to the MrWarrenHayes Show.
Hello.
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 Thank you for having us.
No, well, thank you for being here. I'm the kind of person that, it's like, I find it's common courtesy now in our modern age to have guests on who have their own projects, who have their own podcasts, to go straight ahead and plug their stuff from the get-go. Not at the end when everyone's already X'd out of the thing, right? Now they're starting off, they're trying to get compelled here. So why don't we start with that, Trish and Sarah? Tell us a little bit about yourselves.
So I'm Sarah. That's Trish. We have a podcast where we talk about wrestling.
Look at that.
And it comes out every other Tuesday. So we're members of the Social Suplex Podcast Network. And I'm trying not to go into my podcast intro because that's what I want to default to. But yes, we're members of the Social Suplex Network. We have our own podcast feed. We have their podcast feed. You can find us on YouTube, on Twitter, on Blue Sky, pretty much everywhere that anyone else is. We're also, unfortunately, or fortunately, there. So...
Hey, there you go. So Trish and Sarah is what you want to look for, and they do great work. I'm assuming there's probably already a measure of my audience who know who you are. I think there's a bit of crossover on that aspect because I do some live streaming. You guys come up quite a bit. And here's a question I have for you. Okay, here's a question that just popped into mind here. So Trish and Sarah Podcast. Why did you decide to go with Trish as the top billing of the podcast?
Well, I would like to say she's better at it than I am, but I think it just she's mad already. It just rolls off the tongue a little bit easier, I think. Sarah and Trish Podcast doesn't quite have the sound. I like the short syllable, 2 syllables. That just kind of, we agonized over the name for quite a long period of time, but then I finally said, fuck it, we're just calling it this because we couldn't come up with anything funnier. Or more interesting. Yeah,
you didn't come up with something like ringside chats or in the ring.
We came up.
No.
We came up with all sorts, didn't we? We had some
Hurricane Rana podcast with her.
Yeah.
We wanted to get across the fact that we were women and we were talking about wrestling, and I was like, ultimately, nothing is going to be better than our names. That will basically give us what it is. But yeah,
that's hilarious.
And it has led to some fun moments of people being like, "Who are Trish and Sarah?" Which we love to read. Quite frankly, I'm not being sarcastic. It genuinely makes us crack up every time. So please keep doing that.
It's always on the board. Every time it's on the board, and we'll just post under our names. And some people know it's us, some people don't. We've not been quiet about it now, but they still go, "Who's Trish and Sarah?" And underneath, I'll just post, "Yeah, who indeed."
Okay, well, I mean, I can get behind the the auditory aspect of it, just to want to make it sound a little catchy. That's fair. I was just wondering if if there had been some finagling, like Trish gets a better cut of something or whatever. I don't know. I'm an investigative journalist. I'm not, but
These are the hard questions, Warren. I'm glad you're asking them.
There you go.
Yeah, honestly, Warren, you're putting more thought into this than we did the name.
There's a lot of panicking.
So these 4 pillars, right? The 4 pillars of AEW, just for a little bit of context, maybe a refresher as well at the same time, maybe for some new people who don't know exactly where this came out. The four pillars of AEW generally refer to MJF, Jack Perry, Sammy Guevara, and Darby Allin. And the term four pillars itself in pro wrestling is not something that was just made up in recent circumstances. It's been historically attributed to four legendary pro wrestlers of All Japan Pro Wrestling, Mitsuharu Misawa, Kenta Kobashi, Toshiaki Kawada, and Akira Taue. And we started talking about this in the context of AEW because of MJF. Again, he's to blame for this. And he cut a promo on the September 30th, 2021 edition of Dynamite, where he basically was talking about, like, this was in a promo where he was basically saying, if TK doesn't give me the opportunities I want, I'm going to quit, right? Which is a theme in AEW to a degree. And this is the exact quote that MJF gave us regarding the four pillars, where it all started. This company keeps building more and more momentum, and whether I care to admit it or not, there are a handful of young men who've been here from the beginning that will keep pushing this company forward for the next couple of decades. The four men, to be exact, four pillars. Jungle Boy, beat him. Sammy Guevara, beat him. Darby Allin, whatever. And then you get the strongest pillar, the pillar who had the first match at Allin, the pillar who participated in the first ever match for this company, the youngest athlete to main event an AEW pay-per-view, the pillar who is better than you, and you know it. Of course, he's talking about himself, just in case you're not quite sure about that. And this was later brought back up by Tony Khan on an appearance on the Wrestling with Brandon F. Walker podcast, where, this whole thing about the four pillars of AEW got people talking. And Khan responded to this with the following quote: "There's more than four pillars. There are those who he," meaning MJF, "named, and that's his personal list. I think those four are all pillars of this company and then some. But we have so many." And he's right, those four are all building blocks of this company: MJF and Darby Allin and Jungle Boy and Sammy Guevara. But there are many others that I can list. We talked about Orange Cassidy, Dr. Britt Baker. We can talk till we're blue in the face. Ricky Starks and Hangman Page. So many young stars. So the idea is that we have that we put together a collection of four young stars to prop up the company as good pillars do, and that are perceived as being the future of this company. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to sort of give a bit of a status as to where we feel all four of these gentlemen are at right now. Do we think that they are still considered pillars of this company? And maybe towards the end, if we have time or whatever, maybe we'll come up with our own pillars, maybe our own little list of four or whatever. Could be just one. Sometimes you just need one really good pillar. Makes up for, weird building structure, but
I don't know about that, Warren.
What if it's a really good one? It's like, what if it, I don't know, and it spreads out. Look,
Warren,
I know nothing. I'm not an
Warren,
engineer.
Sarah is probably the most experienced person you could ever talk to on this subject.
I don't know.
So you never know.
Yeah, you never know. So if you think it's not going to work, then okay, we won't do just one pillar. Anyway, let's get starting with why don't we start with MJF? How about that? Why don't we start with him? The guy who started up the conversation. Well, look, we know where MJF is at right now. I'd like to start getting your thoughts on this guy here. Let's say, just to open up the conversation. Trish, why don't you give us some thoughts of where MJF is at right now in the company?
Glad you probably started with me, because Sarah's thoughts on MJF.
I know.
No. No. So Max has been the most consistently pushed guy through AEW's history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was the guy earmarked from the start. It might not have been as clear on television going forward, but he has been consistently pushed. He's been with one veteran after another, and now he leads programs all the way up to 2023, where he was basically just the entire show. That's what it felt like. And he's had a lot of success out of that. He's had huge amounts of success. He talks about, I wish he wouldn't do it in promos, but he talks about his buy rates and his attendance and that sort of thing. And he's right on that. But there's two things I think where he is now is that because he's been on TV for so long, he feels overexposed and he doesn't feel the level of performer that he was previously. And the second one, which I think has become really in kind of something that we look at now, and we look at Max and we see what he can do. We can see the promise, but we also see his kind of overindulgences and the fact that he really needs an editor. So this is a guy, and look, you've got to look, he did come pretty far. You've got to look at him. When he came into AEW, people saw him for his charisma and his speaking. Nobody really ever saw him as a great wrestler or as a promise of a great wrestler. And I think he's become that, but he just needs something, a change up. He's at that point now where he needs to kind of flip something. So yeah, he's absolutely the most successful of any of them. And, he is a genuine draw, but he's just at that point where he's kind of at a crossroads of where do you go from here and not just carrying on his cycle.
Yeah, I think you're just about right. A lot of that makes sense. Sarah, do you want to go off?
No, I'm going to try and restrain myself. This is not, I think that MJF is incredibly, incredibly talented. I think he is very smart. And I think, as Trish said, he's not just a good promo, not just a good talker. He's a good wrestler, which is something that you don't always have in one package. And I think that's part of what helped him become so successful so quickly in AEW. I also think he was smart in that he embraced being a heel in a way that, I know that we're going to talk about Sammy Guevara, and he initially was a heel, but MJF embraced it, I think, to a different level than somebody like Sammy did. So I think that all helped him. But I think, like Trish said, he needs an editor. He's sort of devolved into some of his worst instincts, and I think he needs to work with people who are going to challenge him creatively. And I don't know that anybody that he's I don't know that Jeff Jarrett is challenging MJF on a creative level. I'll just say that much. So I think these are things that, he's such a young guy, and I think it's so hard when you have success that young. And I think, he definitely needs to kind of engage, take a break, and I think refresh himself is something that, like Trish said, he just really needs to do. He needs, because he is overexposed and he is exhausting. It's the same old for minutes and minutes and minutes every week, which I also think doesn't help him either. So.
There's been a lot of talk recently about the content of his promos being pretty much always like in the same vicinity of things to cover, right? I consider that, I feel, I should say, that I have a bigger tolerance for a lot of MJF's content in his promos than a lot of other people. I think I see what he's trying to do, and to it, and I appreciate it. I think I kind of like the idea of him being of him leaning so much into being a heel that he doesn't really care in what type of territory he goes into. And I have maybe and I can understand that it's very personal that I have this level of tolerance for his kind of bullshit than most people otherwise wouldn't have. But even I'm kind of like, okay, well, maybe it's time to just refresh things a little bit. Maybe it's time to just try something else out, because he's really good at being a very nasty, dastardly heel, right? His initial feud that he had with Cody back in the day, when he finally turned on him after being his friend for so long, when everyone else saw through it, Cody was just, Cody was blinded by, I don't know, the new promotion starting up, and, probably working on the design for the neck tattoo at that point as well. He didn't have the focus to see that MJF was being nasty to him. And that was always like a good little hook that he had back then. And that carried him for quite a bit. It carried him even into, his feud with Chris Jericho when they were doing the Inner Circle stuff. I thought that was interesting too, because he had two dirty players going after each other, I thought that was really interesting as well, even though maybe the outcome after with the Pinnacle and whatnot, and the Pinnacle just like deflating. Well, there's not much that's a whole other podcast, I think, in and about itself. But there was a lot of stuff that back then made him. I don't know if this makes sense. If it made him, it gave him an edge, but without the edginess. Yeah.
I think that's reasonable. I'm always someone who I will criticize MJF for being lazy before I would criticize him for being, sexist or racist, which I know he has done on different promos at times to
Sure.
different criticism. And I've said this on our podcast. I don't necessarily think that you should, it's like comedy, right? I'm not necessarily somebody who thinks that you should blanket ban certain topics from comedy. And I don't know that you could blanket ban things from wrestling, but at the same time, you have to do them in a smart way that you're punching up and not punching down. And I think one of the problems with MJF is it's like now it's rote, it's repetitive, it's old. Like half the time it's like, oh, let me read somebody's Wikipedia page and recite in my promo all the facts about their career in case you don't know them, audience at home. And it's just like we could do this maybe a little bit more intelligently. Like you said, his stuff with Chris Jericho was interesting. And maybe part of it was that it was interesting because it was early on and we hadn't seen as much from him. But like, the stuff with Wardlow was interesting. There was other stuff he did that was good. And it's kind of like, oh, all right, now we're stuck with this. It's just deflating in some ways because you're like, this guy's so young and so talented. And we're stuck with.
Do you think that he has the capability to change the structure of his programs?
I think he does.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot of people who say no to MJF backstage.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really don't. I don't even know who would say no to MJF, honestly.
The thing is like, so we've seen the kind of trials to get to MJF kind of structure all the time. We've seen the same promo structure repeatedly. And I do wonder that after he did do something different with Adam Cole, how that kind of ended up, if that's kind of scarred him and forced him to go back to kind of familiarity and stopped him from trying something new, working with people who would challenge him. It's just something that sits in the back of my mind, really.
So
I think that's interesting. I think one of the biggest problems that the Cole stuff for me is he was so lost as a babyface. Like he had clearly no idea what to do. And I wonder, like, I agree with you that I think I don't know if he's scarred. I do think that's a possibility. But I think the fact that like the babyface stuff just didn't work. He didn't know what to do with it. He was lost completely. And it didn't help anything that was going on in that program. So like, yes, but I kind of would like to, I think as a heel, he's certainly capable of trying something new and interesting and succeeding at it, quite frankly. But like I said, he has to pick opponents that are going to challenge him creatively, like, and people who are going to be able to tell him no, not just want to tell him no.
Yeah. And look, he's going to be a key piece to this company for years ahead.
As he should be.
It makes absolutely no sense for him to be kind of not phoning it in, but like picking opponents where there's no challenge to him, where he just kind of does best of acts. It's far too early for him to be doing greatest hits tours.
Right. I agree. Especially when you consider like the people who he has feuded with, right? From Cody, like CM Punk, right? One of the handful of people who actually got to work with Phil. John Moxley, we mentioned Jericho, but Danielson on top of that, Will Ospreay as well. And he's, maybe didn't have as extensive feuds, but he beat Kenny Omega, he beat Hiroshi Tanahashi, he beat Adam Page, he beat Jay White, he beat Daniel Garcia, he beat Adam Cole, Samoa Joe. Like, he's in a position where like he's super protected. He's a guy who is absolutely positioned to be one of the top dudes in the company. And one of the things that often gets pulled out, especially was pulled out during the CM Punk feud, was his insecurities, right? And I think that the insecurities part isn't necessarily only an MJF character trait. I think it's a Maxwell Jacob Friedman trait. And to be at this place at his age, there's a lot of these insecurities I'd let go, and I'd be open to sitting down with people and letting them, like you guys are pointing out here, suggest it, like challenging some of the things he wants to put out, because he's already at the top. He's already at the top of the of this promotion. It's just a question of time. It's just a question of time before he gets back into the world title picture, as when we're recording this. But he's there. He's worked with top people. He's defeated top people. I don't know what he's worried about in that sense.
I think what's unfortunate about this is that when you think about people who've allowed themselves to push a little bit, right? You end up with people who are, you can see already, there are folks setting themselves up for a career-long rivals, right? Mm-hmm. Swerve and Hangman spent the last year setting themselves up for a career-long rivalry. Ospreay with Fletcher, Ospreay with Swerve, right? Like, these guys have been generous enough in their, not just in the winning and losing, because again, that's sort of irrelevant, but like the part where they communicate and talk to each other, it's a lie, but like they're willing to like creatively go with someone who's going to push them and change their character and change the way they present themselves, and it allows them something that they can go back to in a different way, in a way that's fresh, that the audience is going to be into it, because that's what MJF hasn't really allowed himself to do that. We don't really have any generational rivals for MJF. You can point to Darby at one time, but that's kind of petered off. Like, he doesn't really have anybody young that you could point to and say, oh, that's MJF's, he's going to feud with that person forever.
Sure.
And I think it's kind of a thing that like he lacks.
I like that. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, go ahead, Trish.
And the other thing about him is, so you say wins and losses don't matter, and you knew that I was going to roll my eyes in some way at that. But
Bruce Pritchard over here.
He hasn't put anybody over to allow them to become that rival. So he has this thing of he'll go 1-1 or he'll go 2-1, but he always has to get something out of it. And almost to do that, you have to make yourself vulnerable, and not just as a character, but that's a personal thing as well. Right. And someone like Kenny Omega's always got that, Adam Page is renowned from it in that company. But the guys that really get it is that to elevate somebody, sometimes you've really got to put them over, and that will help you in the long term. And sometimes I think he restricts himself from that. He feels like he always has to have something out of it, when sometimes just that whole program and process will give you that. You don't need to protect yourself in all the ways that you do. And that's something he should be looking at this year. You're super protected. As you said, him and John Moxley, absolutely the most protected people in that company from the start. And if you can give back in some way, in that way, you're going to help elevate them up to your level now. And maybe he's young to be doing that, but because of the push that he's gotten, it doesn't feel that way. And it just, so he should be looking around. He should be looking around the locker room and thinking, these guys are setting themselves up. Where am I going to be in 5 years? Not where am I now?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, everyone points back to the Tanahashi Okada as the perfect example of that, and look at what it did for Tanahashi. And look at what it did for Okada, of course. But that's an interesting thought. Do you think that? And I'm asking both of you, but do you think that maybe that's what he wanted to do with Adam Cole, but then the story went the way it went, and everyone just wanted it erased from memory, as opposed to, oh boy, this is really exciting?
I don't know. I think it's clear that MJF enjoyed working with Adam Cole on a level that, like, I don't know if you could say that about a lot of other folks he's feuded with. Like, he seemed to be willing to try different things with Adam Cole, and I think it's part of the reason why, and I know there's a lot of debate about this, that from my perspective, the Brochacho stuff was at least successful in the beginning because MJF was different, right? He was different, and Cole was different. They both were different than what their characters had been up to that point, even if you want to say just slightly. I think the issue is that, I don't know that Adam Cole is strong enough as a wrestler or a character to be a good foil for anyone. Mm-hmm. And I feel bad saying that, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
I agree.
Fine. You're not hurting my feelings.
I know, but...
No, but that's the thing, right? It's like, maybe there was part of that in this story that, I'm just trying to, with everything you're saying right here. And,
no, I think it's a good counterpoint. I think I think there's definitely points in MJF career where you could sort of see him trying things. Like I think he was clearly trying something with the Four Pillars feud, which I found more successful in some ways than others did.
Really?
Trish and I fight about it all the time. But I also think that like there's that self-protectiveness that it gets in the way of him truly growing and going to the next level as a character and as a I don't know, wrestling personality. That sounds terrible.
Well, but yeah,
was Cole ever a challenge for him? Was he a challenge to him personally to bring out these things? He needs to work with somebody that's going to challenge his story structure, challenge his way of thinking. Go from just the kind of a shock points and actually come out to like a different way of psychology so people can see the character develop. And you have to be brave for that. I don't think, what he did with Adam Cole was different, but I don't think that was him being brave to that extent. I think some of it they fell into and they realized it was working, got hot and run with it. And that's good in itself. But I don't know if he's brave enough to do those other things. I don't think he saw Cole in that way. He thought he could give something to Cole, but he never felt challenged by Cole, if that makes sense.
As opposed to
that's a good point.
As opposed to when you worked with CM Punk, where there was probably a lot of challenging going on when that feud was happening, because that one was sometimes got a little spicy. That was it was good stuff.
And maybe that's the fallout from the Punk situation and his part to the Punk situation and losing the feud for the title that ended up being his match with John Moxley. Maybe some of that is the kind of scar damage that reflects on this now. I wouldn't be too surprised on that one either.
But nonetheless, look, I mean, like we said, he has a litany of victories in AEW. He's currently the longest, he currently has the longest run as world champion at 406 days. I rattled off a whole bunch of top names that he's beat. Would we be comfortable or not in saying that he has been the most successful of these four pillars?
Oh, I don't think you can argue that point.
Yeah.
Okay, then
There's easily. I mean, and some of this, I do think it's worth pointing out that some of this is, and you get into this, Trish is a wonderful thing about this, it's the booker, right? You can't say it's 100% on the wrestler because MJF has been given these opportunities, right? By somebody who put that faith and trust in him. So yes, he's been the most successful, but I think you have to remove like, okay, this is up to these guys specific, you know what I mean? Like it's maybe not Sammy Guevara's fault completely that he hasn't been as successful as MJF.
Well, what a segue into talking about Sammy Guevara then.
Oh, I do love a good transition.
Don't we now? I mean, I got chills here. So Sammy is another one of the OGs, and he's had somewhat of a different path here, a little bumpier in that regard. He is part of AEW history, being a part of the first match on Dynamite, the very first match on Dynamite #1 against Cody, in which he entered the Jericho Orbit afterwards as part of the Inner Circle. Sarah, do you want to start this off in regards to old Sammy here? What are your thoughts on him?
Poor Sammy Guevara. I have a soft spot for the guy, and I think he's sort of the victim of his own success in some ways, in that, he became accessible to audiences partially because of his vlog. And I also think some of the stuff with his personal life impacted how the audience viewed him, and his on-screen relationship with Ty Mello, which I think I just think it's a bad idea in general to put your relationship on TV. It's just not a good idea. So I think that has definitely hurt him. And I think he should have turned heel in that feud with Men of the Year that went on for the TNT title for it was like 3 years. It wasn't, but that's what it felt like. And I feel like the booking in that was so weird and messed up. And I think part of it is that Sammy is a likable person. He has a likable moveset, right? And people say this all the time. He's got a likable moveset and sort of a douchey face, and you want to dislike him as a character, but then he gets in the ring and you're kind of like, oh, this is fun. Like, I want to cheer for him too. I don't know. I don't think he's been successful, but I also think some of it is that he's not, as a character, particularly strong. And that's also hurt him. Once he's away from like a group or a faction or Jericho, it's sort of like, what are you by yourself? And I don't know that he could explain that to me.
Trish, do you have any thoughts?
So you pinpointed, I think, his kind of, I was going to say pinnacle, but that's twice in a week I've made horrendous puns. Yeah, so no, but the stuff
twice?
with
only twice, like, you know.
It's probably more. It's probably more. My memory's shocking these days. I'm going old and grey. But no, the Scorpio Sky program. So I think Sarah's absolutely right that people connected with him through the blog and everything like that. And then obviously when they did the proposal thing, which wasn't actually on TV, but I think they put it on YouTube, if I remember correctly.
They
and then everything.
Yeah, they put it on social media, but then they did a shortened part of it, which they broadcast on TV.
There we go. Thank you. But yeah, so when that then fall apart, which is just, that's life, things change, but there became this like perception of him. And then they could have run with it. So there was like a 2-week period where they actually switched him heel, and then they flipped it back. And then the whole thing just became a mess. I remember actually there was a show I went to in South Carolina, and there was a bit where he was trying to smash in like a car window, and it ended up screening on Rampage, and they barely cut it down because he spent it felt like 5 minutes trying to bash this window in. And I'm like, you are playing completely the wrong role. It was just painful. I actually felt sorry for him while I was watching it. And I'm pretty sure that wasn't what they were going for. But yeah, I think Sarah has it spot on that it's a character thing for him. So he works quite well in a group, in that kind of that role of the guy that goes out first, similar to, I guess, Wheeler Yuta's role or Daniel Garcia when he's in it. That's the same role. But we haven't ever seen him develop from that. And I think he struggles to match his offense and even to be the cocky heel. And you want to cheer him like a babyface, but I just think there's so much history and so much kind of built into that perception that it's now difficult to escape that. And it's kind of disappointing to see him kind of just being a guy on Ring of Honor now. He is just a guy on Ring of Honor, and not developing into something more, because especially when he had his TNT run, he had a decent run. He was doing good numbers for young women as well. So you can't expect me to do a whole lot of this and not remember something about numbers. But no. So there was promise there, but there's just so many things that have kind of disrupted it, and I don't know how you now escape the kind of perception that he's in. So
yeah, no, I agree. I agree with the perception issue, which comes from a lot of things, right? Because there's a lot of stuff backstage that happened with Sammy that I think ultimately did end up tainting his perception. Just the Mercedes Moné comments. I think that's something that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and that was, strike one, maybe even strike 1 and 2, straight off the bat. And then, there's the, he started getting a reputation of also being unsafe, the All Out 2020 match with Matt Hardy, despite the fact that I think Matt did it to himself, if my memory serves me correctly. But nonetheless, there's all this stuff. He gets, no one likes the teacher's pet, right? And it's pretty clear that Tony Khan and him get along swimmingly and that they like each other. He invited the boss to his wedding. Sammy did, and so you hear the rumors backstage where, oh well, he gets into an altercation with Eddie Kingston. Eddie Kingston gets suspended for 2 weeks. Nothing for Sammy. He gets into an altercation with Andrade. Andrade gets sent home for 2 weeks. Nothing for Sammy, right? And okay, what, well, I think these are things that ultimately end up poisoning the well a little bit, and then, well, he comes back, and then, he he gets suspended because he doesn't follow concussion protocols after fighting Jeff Hardy, which is who's a concussion protocol in and about himself now. So, you know, it's like, you kind of feel bad for the guy, but at the same time, it's like you have all of these things where the discourse that accompanies from a lot of people is, well, what are they doing? Like, just get rid of the guy. Stop pushing him. Stop trying to do something. And I think this is what Tony Khan might be doing by sending him to Ring of Honor to just let him, quote unquote, cool down a bit. You know, like you go to, you know, you head to Mexico when the heat's on, you know, right? Well, you send him to Ring of Honor, you wait till it dies down, and then you bring him back. I think that might be part of the issue. And for me personally, again, on top of that, I've never really been a Sammy Guevara guy. Like out of these 4 pillars, he's the one where I'm like, I get it, but I also don't. And so you know, he's a guy I've always had difficulty getting into. I appreciate the insane stuff that he has done in pro wrestling, trying to entertain me, which he also likes to remind us once in a while. It's like, you know, but look, to me, with everything that's happened, even disregarding my own personal thoughts, everything that's happened on a personal level, you know, proposing to his then girlfriend, and then eventually, like, what is it? August, September, October, November, I think, is when he started to make his relationship with Tymello public. That's like 4 months. So you get engaged, you break up, and then you find another girl within 4 months. You know, all that stuff looks weird to people. You know, we're talking perception. You know, I wouldn't even question myself. Book me as a heel, Booker man. Like, that's what you need to do. Like, just lean into it and make that happen instead of trying to make me come across as a babyface. You know, if that makes, I think it does make sense, right?
He's just a natural heel anyway in terms of his mannerisms. I remember watching him in Riot Lucha Libre right at the start of AEW, and he was brought in as, you know, the star coming in, and normally they get cheered. And by the end of the match, I think it was Erez. It might have been Erez. Like, he was just getting, or it's Bandido, I think, but he was just getting booed out the building. So his mannerisms come across that way. The thing about with Ring of Honor is he's in there and he's playing the same Texan straight cut babyface that he was trying to play a couple years ago. So it's kind of very similar to Max, where it is kind of like, you know, we've seen this character. You've got half a new audience that you need to kind of acclimatize yourself with. You know, you look when he went back and was doing the kind of the key card thing, when he's holding up the cards, the cue cards, sorry. And half the audience had no idea what he was doing. So you have to adapt to the fact the audience has changed as well. And I just don't see that. And unless you see something in that, I don't see kind of where he goes from here. It's kind of a theme with some of these guys, you know, and because we are talking about over 5 years of history now, that we need to start seeing something else. We need to see that you can adapt, and to be able to move forward, really.
It's not as if he's been like completely without success, right? He's had he's had some good runs with the TNT title. He had that great match with Cody, of course, with the during the interim TNT title nonsense, which was truly nonsense to make an interim title for a month. That was just that's still baffling to this day as far as decisions go. So, you know, he's had a good share of success, but you know, when you look at his own like record, it's not as impressive as a guy like MJF, right? He's fighting a lot of mid card guys. That's essentially what he's doing. You know, not the big stellar wins, not the big, you know, the one guy that you can hang your hat on. You know, he I know paths didn't cross, but you know, he doesn't like have a win like against the Will Ospreay or Kenny Omega, or, you know, he hasn't had that. He hasn't had that moment yet. Do you think that it's even all that like, okay, I was going to ask, do you think it's even all that necessary? But we can even say, is this Sammy's ceiling, or can he go any higher than that?
Well, I think it's not just a question of he hasn't had that win. It's he hasn't had that match. He hasn't had that program, right?
Okay.
For all that we talk about MJF being stale, MJF has had a couple of programs that you talk about for good and ill, right? That people stick in their brain, that people remember. Yes, Sammy had a decent-ish run with the Inner Circle, and he had a decent-ish run with the TNT title, but I don't know that you can look at Sammy's matches or everything he's done, and probably with the exception of that one match with Cody, who's not there anymore, you're not really looking at him and going, wow, I really remember that. Like, that stuck with me. Like, that was something I really have a connection to. And I think that's more than anything else, like, part of where the problem is. And maybe, I do think Sammy was coming into it the weakest of the four pillars, just in terms of like if you look at the overall picture, but I think he hasn't necessarily progressed either in a way that you want to see. And I want to say this clearly about all four of the guys, and I understand that some of them are closer to 30 now, but there's a lot of wrestlers that didn't really hit their stride until they were in their mid 30s. So, it's I never want to write anybody off, right? And maybe he can go down to Ring of Honor and do something different and try something new. But as Trish said, if it's just going to be the retread of the same character we've seen and not totally connected with in the last 5 years, then it's hard to see how he can turn it around and become more successful.
Makes sense to me.
That's to say, he's had opportunities. There are people who've had less opportunities to deliver something memorable that have been able to. And I think that's the difference maker and why the kind of mid-card feels like he's ceiling right now.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. That's a good wrap up of his position. So let's say we do the same exercise as we did with MJF. Where would we put Sammy as far as, do we think he's been successful as a pillar, or at least how successful has he been, do we feel, as a guy propping up the company for decades to come?
I mean, you need mid-card guys. Like,
Sure.
It's like, you need mid-card guys. Like, I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to be an asshole, but like, as a company, you do need likable mid-card guys. And if that's Sammy's ceiling, then that's a pretty damn successful ceiling, right? To be a mid-card guy on a national televised promotion, there are a lot of people that would kill for something like that. So do I think he's necessarily achieved what was possible for him at the start of AEW? No. But I don't know that necessarily means that he's a failure completely either.
Right.
Yeah, that's perfect to me. Perfect summary.
Let's move on to Jack Perry then, why don't we? It was another pillar who's had a winding road, some ups and downs, but one that I feel there has been true effort put into him and to establish him as a top guy. And this is where we're at with him right now, where he's disappeared off TV again. We're taking some time off. We're regrouping. Of course, the last stretch coming off of the CM Punk stuff at Allin 2023, Crimea River, all that, the scapegoat gimmick. That for a while felt to be up very, very good for him, lifting him, but stuff happened and it worked for a while, but that momentum hasn't been able to sustain. I have some ideas as why, but Trish, I'm sure you do have some too. Where do we start with Jack Perry's tenure as one of these four pillars?
Jack is someone that you kind of have to split into different parts of his tenure, I think. So I think they did the right thing with putting him in the tag team at the start. It really got him kind of over with the audience. And they did the right thing in terms of trying to secure him sideways into singles, to showing his promise, especially when he won the Battle Royal at Double Nothing 2021 and had the 5-week program with Kenny Omega, which did really, really well and kind of showcased him. And even the stuff with Christian Cage, that was really well structured. That match at Revolution in 23 was great. And then kind of things went off the rails. So they put him with Hook. It's a good tag team. They actually should have left that longer. I do still think quite strongly about that. And then they started getting the fan response. And sometimes you can't predict that. Sometimes I think the Pillars program really kind of pushed that along, because there was the long promo stretches, the kind of shooty promos everywhere. And that just didn't work for him. And it set him back. And then, yeah, it was the right thing to turn him heel. And then All Out happens, he disappears. And then you kind of have that second part of his kind of career in AEW. So the scapegoat thing, so he goes to New Japan. I did think he got a lot. Oh, hello.
Oh, no.
He got a lot out. Oh, hello. I don't know what's going on. He got a lot out of the New Japan stuff with the promo work, especially. So there was some development there. And when he came back with a scapegoat character, you know, he'd obviously been thinking about it a lot. There was all the merchandising, everything around it. He felt like he had a lot more thought. And then I think the big mistake on that was honestly that he came back as a heel.
Mm-hmm.
I think that should have been a babyface character. He wrestles like a babyface. He cannot wrestle as a heel in that sense. Maybe he can wrestle as a flashy heel at some point, but in terms of the kind of, he's trying to do like a control heel gimmick where he's like a power guy and he's holding these guys, and it's like, and he's going to restrict his moves. But this is a guy that does flashy moves, that's attractive, and all those sort of things. It doesn't work, and the more that's kind of continued, the more his kind of responses to him have decreased, and we're just not seeing it. So he's tried something different. You know, he's gone with a different kind of promo style, different kind of cadence, these kind of theoretical kind of videos and that sort of thing. But I don't think he's been able to string it all together in the way that someone turning heel like a Hangman Page has this year. He doesn't have that capability yet. So maybe he's exposed some of his weaknesses. I like that he's trying, but it's kind of sad that that's not worked out. But he, again, is still very young. Sarah, help me here.
I think that of all four of the pillars, Jack Perry has shown the most willingness to try something new and has been the most successful at trying something new. I feel like the scapegoat character is extremely different from the Jungle Boy character, and was, you know, for a while, which I think is a credit to him, because I think we've seen from other wrestlers, that's not an easy thing to do, right? And to get the audience to buy into it. And he's been able to do that. So that's a positive. I do think that the Four Pillars feud damaged him more than the other three in some ways. Like Trish pointed to, in terms of him needing to turn heel maybe a little bit sooner than he should have. He probably should have stayed with Hook for longer. I think part of the reason why the Christian stuff was so successful was because we all knew that was coming, and they dragged it out a while, but they dragged it out almost the perfect amount, right? Like, you knew Christian was going to turn on Jungle Boy at some point, and you kind of were like, he's going to do it. And they, like, a lot of times AEW feuds and stuff like that just goes on way too long. That one, for whatever reason, did not. They nailed the timing on it perfectly. I don't think they did with the Jungle Hook. I always hear Alvarez going, Hook Boy. Makes me nervous. But what can I say?
That's
but
awful.
I do think, I just think that in terms of character stuff, the fact that he's willing to try new things, and I think, like Trish said, the Japan trip was huge for him. I think his promo style, and it got significantly better. And if he was able to marry that new promo stuff and the character stuff with the wrestling style, he'd be a lot more successful. But I'm way more optimistic about him than I am about somebody like a Sammy Guevara. Like, I think he's capable of making the changes. It's just a question of fitting everything together. And that, to me, is more of like a youth and inexperience thing. And I feel like at some point he's going to put it all together, and we're going to be like, holy shit, I can't believe we doubted this guy, right? Like,
sure, that's fair. I think for some reason it's I think, you know, you both pointed out, I think it's his main issue with the heel turn was the in-ring, and like you pointed out, because he's got babyface offense. He's supposed to be explosive. He's supposed to have he's supposed to do the comebacks and so on and so forth. But now it's like slap a hold, kid, you know, and that's why I think it didn't work out as well in the scapegoat era, if we want to call it that, or the elite era, whatever you want to call it, because his in-ring was just really, really tedious. And I think his character work, for what it was difficult to find some sort of through line, because it felt a little scattered. It was like a little all over the place. Was he, a rich former Hollywood celebrity kid, jagoff kind of thing? Or was he like this dark and brooding guy who does, who blacksmiths in his yard, it's like he smelts his own belts, and that actually rhymes. And there's a bar that you can use whenever, it's putting that out there.
You're
Creative
welcome.
Commons, it's all yours. Yeah,
there you
exactly. Go. And I think there was a bit of a disconnect there. At some point, I don't know if you remember this, early in the Death Riders angle. I don't know if you remember when John Moxley walked past him, right? Backstage, and he was like, "I always liked you, kid," or something like that, right? I think that's something to that effect. And I was like, you know what? That would actually be interesting. That would do him some good. But clearly, they didn't do anything with that for whatever reason. And I feel like people got really exhausted of Jack Perry this time around, and that the removal from TV here is just like it's a strategic retreat. It's like, well, we feel that the audience has got their fill of you right now, Jack. Let's take you off TV, and we'll finagle something to put you back into the mix when time comes, right? He's a tough one, because I kind of want to be on Sarah's side and say that he'll probably be there's potential here for him to be the guy that will be the most surprised about in a couple of years out of these four, right? That will be there. He put it all together, and it's working now. But I mean, he was an okay babyface. I think maybe he got tired of being a babyface, but he was an okay babyface. He had potential as a heel, and it kind of just like, just kind of went. I don't know. Am I too low on him? Maybe I'm too low on him.
Yes. Word yes. I don't know. I feel like you're blaming him for booking stuff rather than character stuff, right? Well, the elite EVP thing petering out the way that it did him no favors, right? Because he was sort of left by himself, right? Yeah. And again, I am with you on the match stuff, right? And I think we've all agreed that the matches did not, his match with Danielson wasn't spectacular. He wasn't blowing the roof off the place as a heel in the matches. But I think, I don't know, I still stand by it. I think he's got the highest upside, right, of anybody in terms of change.
Sure.
And I think there's still, I don't know, he's still too young for me to be like, oh, let's write him off completely. He also wants to do this, right? He's somebody who has enough money to not need to do this. He wants to do it, which to me suggests, I don't know, I always have a level of optimism when it comes to stuff like that.
See, to me, I would be able to forgive a lot of bad booking decisions and being yanked around in weird directions if the in-ring was
valid,
could deliver, right? Where I sit down at a pay-per-view and Jack Perry pops up and I'm like, let's go, Big Mac Jack time, let's go, But like for me, like the only time I really feel he delivered was, I think it was Revolution 2021 against MJF. Was it 2021 or 2020? I can't remember. But he had a match with it. What's that?
2020.
It's 2020.
2020.
Yeah.
So he had this incredible match with MJF, which was one of my favorite matches of the card, which I felt no one really talked about. But I was like, okay, here you go. There, you got two of your pillars here who are delivering exactly what, not as advertised, but as you're kind of expecting them to, and they're blowing me away. But I haven't felt that with Jack since, like it, and it's been, we're going on 5 years now. And I'm kind of waiting for that moment where Jack Perry is going to be like, is going to light the fuse. Here we go. We're talking about puns here, but nonetheless, I'm kind of waiting for for that moment. So I can understand that the creative hasn't been exactly backing him up, but again, if his in-ring work was there, if he wasn't pulling like the Randy Orton special every time he was wrestling, then I'd probably be a lot more forgiving and be like, and then I could point at the glaring problems. The Elite didn't work for him. He should go back to the scapegoat. What if he had a babyface turn? Like, now it's like, I feel like there's a lot of parts missing to him.
Some of that's his choices with his style as well. So I thought, the Danielson match exposed that he's a really good seller. In fact, his selling at the end of that was some of the best selling of Danielson's moves I've ever seen. And it's like, if you could build that into his heel character, he's the Weasel one. And, I actually think the Death Rider thing was a good suggestion, because it would make him similar to how he was with a heel when he was in House of Torture. I can't believe I've just wanted someone to be like House of Torture. I know. Oh my God. But the idea is they run a similar kind of way of structuring their matches. And he fits much more, if you want him to play the heel, to the guy that sells and then weasels his way out at the end. So he would have been perhaps in a much better position to do that. And also, he needs to come out of the comfort zone of who he's working with as well. Yeah, so you can put him with the Elite, but he's not the guy talking. He's not the guy like challenging himself. And in fact, he would have fit much better with the Elite back in 2021 than the Elite of 2025 or 24. Yes. So it's, I'm kind of bullish like Sarah is. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. That he has more pieces that he can put together than someone like Sammy. I definitely agree on that. It's just whether he's able to or not.
Yeah.
There you go. So we've talked. It's been mentioned a couple of times, right? The four person pillar, the 4-pillar match, right, from 2023. Just real quickly, because it affects all three, but this was a match that I think that MJF really wanted to do, because I think he sincerely believes in the 4 pillars, and he was like, we're going to give these guys a time to shine. But it was a terrible idea, I think, overall, that just ended up exposing that neither of the 3 others were really ready at that moment to take it to the next level or go to the top, whatever like tired cliche you want to use. Neither of the 3 were really at that level yet.
I think for me, I want to argue this a little bit, because I agree with you that it ended up terrible. It had some early promise to it that I liked, but the biggest issue I had with the feud was that it became all about that backstage, who does Tony Khan love more bullshit, sure. Right? You didn't work hard enough. You did this, you did that, blah, blah, blah. No one gives a flying fuck about that. And endless wrestlers are constantly convinced. And I'm not going to lie to you. Look, a lot of us are gossip whores for shit that goes on backstage at wrestling promotions.
What?
But most of us, I know, what? Shocking. Most of us don't really care to have it infect the actual programs. Like, I don't really need a feud for weeks about which one of these 4 guys Tony Khan has pushed more. Like, it'd be so much better if it had been like more personal, more about like, I like you or I don't like you, whatever. There were a bazillion. And this is where I feel like this is a function of somebody not saying no, or being like, hey, you guys need an editor, or this is a shitty basis for a feud. We got to have a better reason. Because I think so many of those promos would have been so much better if that hadn't been the topic, right? Like that, for me at least, I feel like making the basis of the feud, who does Tony Khan like more, it was an automatic failure, regardless of like, nobody's character was good. Nobody's going to do a good job with that.
The best promo of that entire program was Sting's with a pom-pom. Legit. But there was also the thing of that it came out of a place where most of these guys weren't prepared for it. So Jungle Hook were doing their team. He wasn't exactly ready to challenge for the title. Sammy, they did the ridiculous, we're going to team up thing, can they coexist? So that was his path to the title. And then Darby do it? Revolution 23. The fact that I can't even recall it tells you that, it wasn't set up for them to be challengers. So the challengers became because they were pillars and not because they'd earned a shot at the world title.
Yes.
And I think that was even more difficult when you had like the Texas Death Match rolling off the back of it, and everyone's like, well, you have a challenger in Adam Page and you're not using him. So it just, it lost its kind of weight to start with. It was something we're doing because we can, not something we're doing because we've laid it out properly and built to it. And then, the shooty aspects of it was just, I mean, that promo, I think it was in Pittsburgh where they did the long 4-way promo in the ring at the start. And it was just dire. And they saved some of it for the match, but the match was also about MJF showing that he could outdo all these people in these things. And if that was what you wanted to achieve from it, then that's what you achieved. But I think it was right that it didn't main event, that it got demoted to that double main event slot. And it was, unfortunately, when you look at it, I think it set most of them back quite significantly. It was a mistake. I was like, I'm glad they tried, but looking back, it was a mistake.
Just brought this up here, circling back to what we were talking about when we were on the topic of MJF specifically, and saying, well, what MJF needs to do is put someone over that can accompany him as a generational rival for him. Maybe this was also part of the plan here. And maybe it just ended up, maybe it ended up shaking MJF's confidence and shrugging and going to Tony Khan and saying, okay, well, which one of these guys then? And if not one of these guys, who's going to be my Swerve Strickland? I mean, I know that wasn't probably not the language that we were using at that moment, but like ultimately, like that's the thing. It's like, who is MJF's Swerve or Hangman Page? I mean, I'm stretching it, right? But
I think you want to do transitions, Warren. This is where we go right to Darby Allin.
Yeah, there you go. Why don't we talk about Darby Allin? Seems like Sarah has some thoughts on that. So the fourth of the pillars that we're talking about, of course, Darby Allin, who who's insane, just certifiably insane. I like Darby a lot, and if we were to grade all four, at least put them in order of success, I would absolutely put Darby in number 2, just behind MJF as far as how far he's come. Let's talk about Darby, Sarah. Why don't you? You seem to be champing at the bit for it, so let's go right ahead.
Thank you for using champing and not chomping.
No, that aggravates me tremendously. You don't chomp bits. That's ridiculous. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to break your teeth if you chomp at the bits. That's absurd. Don't do that.
Thank you. No. I think Darby is, like you said, definitely the second most successful of these four, and I would argue he'd be the most successful if he had been given as many opportunities as MJF has been given. I think Darby has been given opportunities. I'm not trying to say that he's been buried or any bullshit like that, but I don't think you can look at MJF and Darby and say, they've been put on the same level, right? Mm-hmm. I think Darby has the most coherent character of the four. I think you could argue that Darby's character is maybe even a little bit more coherent than MJF's is, or I think there's at least a discussion there to be had. And I think Darby has the ability and the charisma to connect with an audience in a way that, is probably the strongest in some ways. I want to say that more than MJF, even because MJF's been a heel. I don't know if it's a fair comparison, yada, yada, yada. And don't get me wrong, the audience has loved in its own way Sammy and Jack Perry as well. I think Darby comes the closest to being a rival to MJF in terms of being able to equal him. And I think Darby had a promo with MJF during the Four Pillars feud that I thought was the most interesting of anything in that group, where they talked about MJF's insecurities and how, it was definitely the most interesting part of all of that. I think that Darby, one of the things that I find so fascinating is that people are like, Darby's a bad promo. And I say he is, but not for the reasons that anyone states. Darby's not a bad promo because of his delivery, because I'm not somebody who thinks you have to have a specific type of promo delivery. I think sometimes you can have a more unique style and it works better. I think Darby has horrible promo instincts in terms of what he should talk about. Darby is just as guilty as anybody else about backstage bullshit and shoot garbage that he wants to bring up in a promo that no one wants to hear about from Darby fucking Allin. I'm sorry. Nobody wants to hear Darby Allin talk about what shit's going on backstage. They just don't. It doesn't fit with who he is as a character. It doesn't fit with our perception of who he is. And it's not something that we think he should give a shit about. So it's always really jarring.
It's like, while, you get the impression that while, MJF is punching holes in drywall, Darby's in a corner, and he's just sitting there and,
listening to My Chemical Romance.
Exactly.
I think Darby's matches with MJF, it was Revolution 22? Yeah.
Yes.
Where they had the singles match that opened.
Full Gear 21.
Full Gear 21. Yeah. Thank you. Revolution 22 was MJF CM Punk. What the fuck is wrong with me? So yes, I think that that was a spectacular match. That was a great match. I think they work off each other very well as wrestlers. And I think as personalities, if they took the shoot shit out, they would work together very well because as characters, they're night and day, sure. Right? So I think they definitely come the closest. Darby comes the closest to me in terms of people who MJF has had as a rival, but has not necessarily been willing to go all the way with.
Well, there you go.
As to use a tunnel talkism, I guess.
You mentioned the Darby promo. Up until that point, that promo that he cut in the 4 Pillars thing. He never talked. Like Darby never cut promos. He was just like, he'd sit around, he'd come out, he'd do his matches and go home. And I think a lot of people I think at first some of the negative reaction was that we were so not used to hearing him talk that when he did start to talk, it was very, so plain spoken and average that you're like, and I don't mean average in the sense that his performance was average, but the way he delivered
sounds like a normal dude.
Exactly. Yeah. So you were sort of taken aback where you're like, no, Darby should be talking about, he'd be about dark alleys and how he's the creature of the night kind of thing, all this bullshit, and how he's, he's a part of the twisted circus of darkness of, with bearded ladies that have spiders instead of beards or whatever, I don't know. Just things Darby would be.
Your Darby Allin headcanon is deranged in a beautiful way.
I just let myself be inspired by the man. But so I think that was definitely a part of it, but turns out I think he's a very decent promo. I agree. But that goes for pretty much everyone in AEW. Keep the backstage stuff backstage, let's just enjoy the show. And outside of that, I think he's been very good. And he's a guy who also seems to be keeping out of nonsense backstage regardless. And I sometimes wonder if, being tutored by a man named Sting, who probably took him aside maybe a couple of times, said, brother, don't get involved. Stay out of this. If there's one guy who could probably teach a younger guy, when to stay out of the backstage bullshit, I feel Sting would be a good mentor on that front. But anyway, those are just some thoughts there. Trish, what about you? What about Darby? What do you think about him and his pillar position?
You brought up Sting there, and I think that's such a critical thing to how we look at Darby now. And that was kind of the perfect partnership of an older veteran guy and a younger guy, because he wasn't stood behind Sting. And that developed more as they moved further along. that he was presented as an equal to Sting. And that's so important. And that's where we've got this kind of balance wrong currently, that everyone's kind of analyzing probably to death by this point, but hey, there we are. But yeah, it was the way he was presented in that sense. And then he did move out of, you're right, being a mute, where he was previously felt like a Jeff Hardy style character, in that he just wrestled. He was just this crazy guy and we didn't really hear from him. So yeah, it's something to get used to his voice, and that has become important. I absolutely hate the content of his promos sometimes. There was one just before, I always come back to this one, before Blood and Guts, where he was trying to insult the Young Bucks, and he's like, and he says whatever he says, and he goes, but you did actually bring me in. So, what am I supposed to do? And I was just like, no. One in kayfabe, when you did the 4-pillar thing, you said that you weren't brought in by the Bucks, you were brought in by Cody, and it was a California clique. You can't then switch your own kayfabe in your promo, and I was just like, oh no. But again, yeah, maybe it's like the MJF thing, you just need an editor. But the best thing about Darby is that he is one of their best in-ring wrestlers, especially for TV, that they have. He might be the best TV wrestler that is in AEW. That's attractive. He has the face paint. He's cool. Whatever way you want to think about him, he's cool. He'll connect to that younger audience. And we've seen that with his numbers. We've seen that with the crowds, all the kids coming in Darby face paint. And I just think of him very much like a Cactus Jack style character. So he's going to do these crazy things, but people are always going to love him for it. And maybe you can't ever have him as, in that MJF year-long reign role, but you can have him get to the top and then get knocked down and get to the top as many times as you wish. And I think it will always work. So in immediacy, obviously, people think he's got probably the most immediate promise, but I just think there is always going to be a role for him, and he doesn't necessarily need to be a really, really top guy to hit that. Very similar to Orange Cassidy. It feels. I'm trying to think of a word that doesn't sound like mascot, because that's such a underplaying of what they are. That they come in terms of being a pillar or a foundation of this company. In a way, he absolutely very much is, because he's someone that you associate with the brand, and associate with wanting to see that person when you go to a show. So that means quite a lot to me. So yeah, I just think they have found his role for him. I don't think you need to do a massive amount more than that. And as long as his body holds up, which is probably the biggest thing with the crazy things he does, then you just continue him in that role perfectly, to be honest. Just keep him on TV. None of the Rampage 2022 nonsense they did. You just have to give him a consistent role and can find things for him to do. And he's always going to be popular at that base.
I agree, and I think that kind of comparison to Orange Cassidy is very good, because we've seen that people will get behind Darby whether he wins or loses. That really doesn't matter. Darby has this this magnetism, this coolness, combined with the insane stuff that he does and lets other people do to him as well. That just makes him a really attractive package. And you see, as you said, when you called him AEW's best TV wrestler, then my mind started spinning. I'm like, wait, hang on a second. Wait a second. And I'm like, no, I don't know who. Maybe Orange, maybe OC.
I think Orange Cassidy is probably right up there. I think it's like they're 1A and 1B in terms of like they're outrageous characters that if anybody else did it, it might come across as fake, but they're both so authentic in their uniqueness and so specific that it's like you can understand why the audience has such a connection to them. And they're such specifically AEW wrestlers. Like you're not going to see those guys on WWE or anywhere else. Like that's a specific AEW wrestler. And I think, they're both just if you want to say pillar is somebody that is a structural element, to me Darby and OC are more pillars in terms of like you want to tune in every week to see them, you want to buy a ticket to go and see them. Like they're the people that you are like, this is AEW to me.
With MJF, we were talking about his litany of great performers that he's defeated, that he's been pushed in this manner, that he's been pushed as being a top guy. And talking about Jack Perry and Sammy Guevara, we're a little more, well, the booking didn't help them. The booking didn't help those guys as much because they didn't have like these really solid programs like MJF did, or these really solid victories and so on and so forth. Can't the same be said with Darby Allin? Because he's not necessarily a guy who's been going around, beating, Hiroshi Tanahashi over in Japan or whatever, right? But nonetheless, we're sitting here with an agreement, I believe, and with confidence saying, oh yeah, he's absolutely number 2 on the list. And yet his overall push hasn't been on the level of Max's. It's, kind of similar to the 2 other guys. Why do you think that is?
Warren, this raises the question then, is Darby then perhaps number 1 and MJF is number 2?
Oh boy.
Do you think MJF would be as successful as Darby if their situations and pushes were reversed?
Good point, and probably not would be my guess. Yes.
I don't know. I like throw those out.
No, but
I think
it's a good reversal, But the idea, like, you put MJF in the same spot with the same people, not doing the same matches, obviously, but I don't think you get that. You don't get that same squeeze either out of.
Darby's had a lot less TV time than Max has as well, especially over the last 2 years.
Everybody has. Sorry.
That's my girl.
I couldn't stop myself. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. That's great.
I think that Darby is one of those, again, similar to Orange Cassidy. They have such a connection with the audience that their winning or losing is almost sort of irrelevant in some ways, right? Like, sure. you can put them in big spots on big cards and have them lose a match, and it's not necessarily going to damage them, right? I think that there were periods of time in 2022 where Darby was definitely downcycled to a degree that he probably should not have been. Him losing to Jeff Hardy and that Owen was just ridiculous. Like, he probably should have won that Owen, to be completely honest with you. But I think he's still managed to come back from it and, retain that connection he's had. So I don't know. I think, now I'm starting to question whether Darby is more successful than MJ.
I mean, it's, there's the obviousness of star power, but then it's like, you did the reversal, but I'm starting to think it as well. It's like, despite it all, Darby is like, he's a guy that everyone is always excited to see. And he'll wrestle mid-card guys. Like we'll all get excited for a Brody King Darby Allin match. We'll all sit down and be like, all right, let's see how much punishment can be delivered unto one man within these next 8 to 10 minutes, right? And we're excited about that. So we don't need, Will Ospreay or Kazuchika Okada or, John Moxley in there to get to get the hairs raised on the back of our necks. Do you have any thoughts, Trish?
I just think he really knows who he is, and I think that is what connects him to the audience and means that he can get around some of the booking. You never look at him and go, who is this guy? Do I understand, what drives him? Does his style match, his body shape and size? Yeah, absolutely. He's that Daredevil style.
Yep.
It fits who he is. And I think there's so many characters and so many people on this roster who are trying to be something they're not. And to an extent, when Max did his babyface run, that was what that felt like to me. That's a difference. I don't think I've ever felt a time with Darby where I haven't believed who he is. And it all connects, as a wrestler, as a character. That's what kind of drives him. I think it's going to be quite interesting to see what he looks like towards the very top of the card and whether that still works or whether that's a barrier. That could be something that we see this year. But yeah, I do think Sarah's right. I think someone like him, someone like Orange Cassidy, they are AEW. And the more time that is spent on those sorts of guys, the more you see kind of more happiness in the audience, if you will. I think that's the sort of thing that you always have to feature them. You can't let them be taken off to somewhere else. Yeah, I would actually probably put him top in terms of what he's achieved versus what he was given. Yeah, does he have the star power of MJF or the Google Trends? You remember that promo MJF cut on Jay White? It's in the Pollock and Thurston intro. It's like, type your name in Google, type in mine. You're a straight line, I'm a pyramid. I hear that every time and I cringe every time. Like, oh my God, get a grip on yourself.
Not a great moment, no.
But so in terms of, I always like to think about that. So there's what you were perceived to achieve and what you have are two different things, and you come from different levels where you start. And I think he probably has achieved the most out of 4. But what I would look at him as, and the same as Max, is you look at them now and you think these are guys that will be a part of the very top of this company for the years to come. And if that was the aim of the Pillars and that was the kind of thing that was set out, then yeah, him and Max both sit on that level for me.
All right. So let's say we wanted to do a little quick segment that I could clip easily for the internet. If we were to rank the 4 pillars right now from 1 to 4, where would we rank them?
All right, I'm convinced. I've talked myself into it. It should be Darby, then MJF, then Jack Perry, then Sammy Guevara. That's my ranking.
Trish?
I'm going to be really boring and completely agree.
Well, I think it's really difficult to deny MJF, and I understand how. I think I feel like we've had a little newfound appreciation for what Darby has been able to do with what he's been given. I agree, but MJF still is nonetheless a top superstar in this company, which is what they need. Someone that, if they do realign and put him on rails correctly, I think can really do great things. Not that Darby can't, but in different ways. I think it'll do it in different ways. And as it stands right now, is when we're recording this in January 2025, I think MJF is number 1, Darby number 2, Jack Perry number 3, and Sammy at the bottom of the list. That's how I do it. Now, let's say we wanted to reevaluate Sarah, let's say, to begin with. Is there anyone you'd swap out of these 4 pillars?
So part of this is like, when you were like, let's use Tony Khan's definition of the 4 pillars, like I was like, oh, like I hate.
I know, but yeah.
I feel like there's.
We're talking about in the context, young guys, right? Young guys that they can build the company around for many, many years. But specifically and I say guys, but it could be gals too. Just the idea of 4 people that are, under 30 that could still carry the company for years. That's kind of what everyone sort of feels.
I think it's pretty straightforward, and I don't know that I would have chosen anybody different in that when AEW started than what they originally ended up with, or that this 4 was not. I think it's a natural thing. I think you could point to a couple of others that didn't pan out, but I don't think they were ever envisioned as having like the high level ceiling that these guys did. I think one of the challenges with doing this is that we have 5 years of experience of AEW having mixed success with pushing their younger guys and positioning their younger guys in a spot. So it's hard to look at who they have now and see whether or not they've been given opportunities. Do I think that like Wheeler Yuta and Danny Garcia and Lee Moriarty are probably right up there? Yes. I think you've probably got guys like, Lee Johnson, who are also back there, who are probably, maybe a little bit better. You could see Kyle Fletcher, somebody who's been done all that. On the women's side, I feel like Anna Jay has shown a lot more growth and is somebody that I'd probably put money on continuing to grow. I feel like you have somebody like Queen Aminata, who's got a tremendous, her wrestling ability is got to improve, but she's got tremendous charisma and she's different than anybody else, right? So I feel like there's a lot of opportunities out there, but I'm just sort of like, to me, there's probably a lot of unsung pillars from AEW that is going to change over the length of time that you have, right? Like, I probably would have argued that in early AEW, Nyla Rose was a pillar of AEW, sure, right? In terms of the women's division, you needed a credible first defense for a woman champion or somebody who's going to, take on a new. See, you went right to Nyla. Nyla was like the number one always, and gave you decent matches, gave you decent feuds, was a decent heel promo. Like, there wasn't anybody like that. They didn't have anybody like that, right? So those are the kind of people that I feel like you can look at folks and say, Orange Cassidy for me, 2021 to 2023, right? Every week on television, giving you a good match, giving you a babyface to root for, like, whatever the fuck was going on with that promotion, pardon my language, he was out there on a weekly basis. That's a pillar, right? You're built around that. Your audience is used to seeing that. So those are the kinds of things that I would probably look for rather than just like young person we can build around, because you have to then do the building around of those young people.
So, okay. So let's say, with your very eloquent and adapted vision of what a pillar should be, how would you revisit then at this? Let's say we did need to swap out. We needed to go, well, this is the direction we're going with. Would you change anything in the current structure?
Would I change anything? Oh, for the original four?
Yeah.
Right now?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's one of those. Warren, ask me easy questions. Make me look good. I don't know. That's a tough one, right? Like I said, these were all reasonable choices in 2019.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
I still think you could get stuff out of them. I still think they're talented wrestlers. You could get things, even if they're not as top of the card guys. You're still making out with what you have there.
Fair.
Trish,
I accept that answer.
Thank you. Trish, help me out here.
There you go. Yes, Trish.
Okay. Right. So when I looked at this, I know I have a slightly different feeling on pillars. So yeah, I looked at similar to what New Japan are doing with the Musketeers and thinking, this is designating people for the future. And I thought, well, not thinking about who Tony will push, because the answer to this could be like a Hook or someone akin to that, and that's not what I would think you'd want to build around for the future. So I looked at it and thought the two areas where they have struggled to compete with, especially NXT, but other companies as well. The first of all is the women's division is a lot stronger now, but pushing a woman as a very top from your own company is something they've been lapped on numerous times. You've got Bayley and Bianca Belair going back to NXT this week, and both of them were products of that system and were able to compete with AEW in terms of ratings at the very, very start. So there is a huge impetus right now on, women in these kind of roles within sporting culture, and not just developing that because it attracts more of the kind of younger male fan base, but if you get it right, it will bring in younger women as well. So, and I look at that and I look at their roster and I think that Willow Nightingale is your long-term babyface. Mm-hmm. She works so hard. She travels. She's learning. She's doing all those things that are really difficult to do in this day and age because you get put on TV so early. The big thing for me with her is she's willing to take on challenges and she's willing to make mistakes. So if you look at the series with Chris Statlander, the tag matches, especially in the New York pay-per-views for some reason, the one in Long Island, they're both in Long Island, weren't great. And yet when they got to All Out. You know, they go on after Pac and Will Ospreay.
Yeah.
And they're able to deliver that street fight. And that's a kind of level of fearlessness that you need if you're going to be at the very top level. It's the same with promos. You know, when she had the series with Mercedes, she got promo time that she just hadn't got previously, and she just went for it. So that kind of tenacity, that sort of drive is something that I think can separate people from doing this as kind of a day-to-day to them being at the very top. And you need a baby face. You need someone people to root for. I don't think we've worked into this kind of 50 Shades of Grey every character thing. I think you still absolutely need top baby faces in pro wrestling, and she can be that for me. And the other one is, you know, I think they struggle to have someone who is a foreign language speaking top star. I don't think they've been able to kind of sort that out. And you know, people expect me to go with Takeshita here, but let's be honest, I think he's going to be New Japan's ace, so we'll rule him out. But in terms of someone under 30 who could perform that role, I think Bandito is a good pick. I know he's just had his potential concussion issues off the Ring of Honor pay-per-view, but he's an exciting looking character. He has great offense. It's different. He's marketable. You know, not just you look at the promos they ran when he came back, but also kind of the just in general how you can market him. You know, he's the bandit at the end of the day, and you know, he can speak. He's got experience at top of companies. You know, he was Ring of Honor champion for a large period of time. So I think he could be somebody if they really ran with him. It's just doing so. But I think they're the two areas where if I was going to target Pillars, it's about expansion. You do that, but they're also, when I look down that roster page and I look at the young wrestlers, and you know, Kyle Fletcher's probably the only other one that kind of stands out and kind of flings itself in my face. I don't think there's any other two that are as well developed for their age at this point that we've not talked about already. So yeah, they're my kind of two picks to kind of change the bottom two, maybe. There you go.
Sure. Okay. I mean, those are good points. I'm a big Kyle Fletcher guy personally. Like I would in a heartbeat, like, you know, if we wanted to push the reset button on the Pillars today, you know, I'd 100% trade Sammy Guevara for Kyle Fletcher, like in a heartbeat. I think Kyle over 2024 has just, this is going to sound super corny, but has blossomed. Does it, right? We were like proud parents talking about him, right? But he really has like created an entire, this is kind of, okay, look, let's circle back to something I was talking about earlier. This is kind of what I would have liked out of Jack Perry. Given the opportunity, the guy just like dives right into it, bites into it, never wants to let go. Like you had to, you probably, you know, like I see a dog chomping on something and you just have to, he just won't let go of the bone. He won't let go no matter how much you try to tug him away. He's just going to keep his clenched onto it, hanging onto it, trying to shake it out of your hands. That's how bad Kyle Fletcher wanted it. He was put in a spot and he jumped into it and he made it his own. And that's kind of what I hope happens to Jack Perry down the line. So, you know, I think Kyle Fletcher is one of these guys that, you know, once contract time comes around, I do everything in my power to hang on to him. I don't want him to go absolutely anywhere else. I think he's a foundational talent. I think he's one of those. I think he can be. I think he could potentially be like a top star foil for MJF. Like I think he could fill that mold too. Maybe not as a clear-cut way as a Darby Allin could, but I like in a sense of two like handsome star quality top guys with incredible talent. I think they could work perfectly off of each other moving forward. And yeah, like I'm with Trish with the Willow Nightingale stuff too. I don't know why it took Tony so long to push that woman, quite frankly, because she was getting huge reactions,
She was getting huge reactions.
She was getting huge reactions when she was just starting off, still jobbing out. You know, she was always tremendous.
She wasn't even signed to them. She was enhancement talent they brought into the Boston show, and she absolutely, the audience was berserk for her. So yeah, I agree with you about Willow. Warren, the cynical side of me wants to say that you just like Fletcher because he's tall.
No,
and he puts some big muscles on. Like,
no, I'm not one of those. I'm not that much of a body type guy. I really am.
Just giving you a hard time.
That's fine. It's all right.
I like to bust a chop or two.
Exactly.
Warren, do you think that the designation of people as pillars puts kind of an unnecessary pressure on them or on the company to deliver them?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely undeniable. But you know what else? What's also great is that it makes some really great podcast content. That's also the tremendous part afterwards. No, but I mean, like, I live we did it with AEW, right? And we've done it with New Japan as well with the Reiwa 3, right? Mm-hmm. So ultimately, it creates great discussions, but absolutely, like, if we want to take it back to the level of the promotions and the wrestlers, absolutely, it creates an unreasonable amount of expectations, right? You can see in New Japan, right? Like, we're all scoffing and laughing at Ren Narita now, but nonetheless, from out the gate, you could have thought that there might be something there. But now Ren Narita is more considered a joke, and everyone's sort of like, well,
is there an argument that Ren is doing better in his role than Shota Umino?
I think Ren stinks right now. Honestly, you put I prefer Shota to Ren. Like, that's unquestionable to me. Like that, at the very least, there's morbid curiosity that accompanies a Shota Umino match, right? Whereas Ren Narita, it's like, like, I'll look away and it will be fine, kind of thing, you know, at the very least. But you see, like, the thing happened in New Japan as well. You know, we started talking about the Reiwa 3 plus Wimera, right? That's how people, and now Oiwa's back. Yep. So now it's like the Reiwa 3 plus those two guys. And now we have the potential for Takeshita to come in. And Gabe Kidd, right?
Yeah,
who is
competing itself.
That's a good point. So, you know, so now it's like, oh, now we got all these pillars. So maybe now it's starting to flesh out as more like a proper, maybe it's less of three guys, the musketeers, the pillars or whatnot. And now it feels more like, okay, we have ourselves our crop of guys for the future that we're not just leaning on specifically. There's an ensemble cast. It's not a Tom Cruise movie. It's, you know, Knives Out kind of thing. Is that a good ensemble movie?
No, these are good analogies. I like this.
Okay,
yes,
because I feel Knives Out is a good ensemble cast film.
I think that's a good.
Okay, thank you.
I would have used something really dated like Clue. So
yeah, well, but you know what? That's also one of the classics as far as ensembles go. I would have appreciated that one too.
All right.
So okay, well, there. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, yes, it does put a lot of pressure. I think it's a good way to sort of wrap it up. But yes, I think it does put a lot of pressure on both the company and the wrestlers, and maybe in an undue way, and maybe look. Like, I don't think MJF was necessarily trying to start something. I think it's something that he believes. I think it's something that at the time he was like, I'm going to put my boys over. Because for everything that people critique about MJF, he's very good at putting his opponents over. He's very good at that. Oh, no, okay. Well, tell me about that face then. What do you... Like,
I think that... Warren, I love this. You know I love to fight with people about wrestling opinions.
Sure,
this is like my dream come true, and Trish and I are too polite to each other sometimes. I think that MJF gives the appearance of putting his opponents over, but I don't know that he's doing as much as he appears. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors there, right? Like, I think that he puts people in long promo battles, like the Four Pillars, right? I agree with you that he wanted to elevate the Four Pillars, but he also stuck them in a promo battle. Who's better at a promo battle? Jack Perry or MJF?
No, okay, I concur. Okay, yes, but the idea is, and recently I can't remember with who I was chatting with, but the idea that a heel cutting a promo, right? When a heel cuts a promo, there's no point in the heel completely burying the guy.
Agreed. Agreed.
That's what I mean. Where it's like he'll always elevate the other guy in his promo, because otherwise, if all he does is fight chumps and wins against chumps and doesn't bring the audience to realize that his competition is actually competition, well, he won't look all that hot, because all he's fighting are nerds,
I think you have a very good point there, but I also think that some of it is, like, on a surface level, yes, MJF is putting the guy over. He's reading his Wikipedia page. He's talking about how great he is. I think that the that was pretty cutting, wasn't it? But I think when you look at it deeper, MJF is not quite as giving as, I think I point to that Garcia feud, and, I don't think that Garcia came out of that MJF feud better off for having feuded with MJF.
No, I agree with you.
I think he looked, and the whole, like, well, I would have lost to him, but his contract was expiring, bullshit is just too transparent for me. I think that truly putting someone over and truly making someone look better is what we talked about. Genuinely working with them to emphasize their strengths as well as my strengths, right? Mm-hmm. And not just doing stuff that I'm good at, that makes me look good, right? And, he beat me up after the match, but I still got the win, right? I'm still undefeated. Like, I just think I'm a little more cynical about this. And I'm not trying to say there's necessarily bad. Like, wrestling is a fucking shit job. You got to protect yourself to some degree. I'm on board with all of this. But I just think there's a degree to which there's a lot of this, for me, is kind of a surface level of like, well, he said nice things about his opponent. I need a little more than that in 2025. Like, I mean, and I don't see how Jeff Jarrett looked very good last week or 2 weeks ago either, but.
Well, I mean, you can't put all of that on MJF though.
No, JJ didn't help himself. I agree with that. Like, no. But yeah, I don't know. This is, Warren, I feel like I could go back, sit down, write out a list of things and have this debate for another 3 hours. So I don't want to like belabor the point, but I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
Well, I mean, I'm excited for MJF to elevate young upstart Jeff Jarrett, right? That'll be great. That's going to be tremendous. It'll be very giving in the ring,
Have you realized how many people in the last few weeks have given away their age around Jeff Jarrett? Because the ones that watched him in TNA, especially in the 2000s, are just like, well, you could have seen this coming. Everyone else is like, what's going on?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mentioned that on stream a couple of nights ago. It's like, yeah, no, I remember like 2000s Jeff Jarrett, like nobody liked the guy. Nobody. So anyway, yeah. Nonetheless, anyway, I've completely lost the plot here. I don't know what we were talking about. The pillars. We're done. We're done talking about the pillars. That's it. I think we've covered everything at this point. This will probably be the best end of any segment on the show ever right here. I can't thank you both enough for joining me today. This was really, really fun. I love your podcast and I love your insights, and I was glad to be able to pick your brains on this one here. So Trish, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Warren. This was really a fun time. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And we're always so nervous to do anything like this because we are not actually very good at all this. So
what?
That's how it feels still. So no, we very much appreciate you leading us through. So thank you.
It was very easy because okay. Like this is still rolling. Just to be clear, you're the kind of guest that you have on, which is really easy because you ask a question and you just go, and then it's like stuff, and you talk, and everything's brilliant. And then you write a note down. It's like, oh, this is a good point they made. I'll bring this back up. It's like, this is a dream. Are you talking? You kidding me? This is fantastic.
That right. I'm British, so that's too much niceness. So yeah, let's
well,
move on.
I'm Canadian, so there you go.
Okay. I appreciate it though. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.